extension, we've moved in, my kitchen floor starts to crack. And I'm very confused. I'm like, why is the kitchen floor coming up and what's going on?
And he had a number of psychological issues as well. What he started doing was going to the toilet outside for £85,000. We spent about £100,000 refurbishing it. And it's now worth round about £1 million.
Welcome to Property Investing with Abby. On today's episode, we are talking big, fat, massive property fails. So many of you have said to me, I'd love to do property, Abby, but what I think goes wrong? Me and my very special guest have made loads of mistakes, yet we still built big property portfolios where we get great income and built wealth through property. So I am very, very lucky. I'm really excited to be here in Monaco today, and I have my very special guest, Paul Smith on.
Well, thank you, Abby, and welcome to Monaco. It's an absolute privilege and pleasure to be here with you. So what are we talking about today?
So we are talking about property fails. So I've asked Paul to give us a few of his property fails over the years.
Okay, so property fails. Where do we start? What if I get the nightmare tenant from hell? Well, let me tell you, you have enough properties for enough years, you will get the nightmare tenant from hell. And I want to talk to you about one that happened quite recently. We own a property in Doncaster called Springfield House, and it's an office at the bottom, solicitor's office at the bottom, and it's got 5 flats above it. On the first floor, you've got 2 one-bedroom flats. On the first floor, a tenant moves in and he's all properly referenced and, you know, this, that and the other stuff. You get a phone call from the solicitors saying, it's very damp in here. What do you mean it's damp? How can it be damp? Where's the damp? Oh, well, the damp's up high. And it turns out that the tenant above has been flooding the property on purpose. Like, you know, as in leaving taps on, leaving the shower on, blocking the drains, and then going out. Do you think that that is a particularly wonderful experience? So you have to take this very, very serious. And the problem got so bad that the solicitors couldn't actually work there anymore and they had to relocate. And obviously that's expense and everything else for the landlord. In this case, what? Does that sound like it's got the potential for an epic property fail?
Yikes. So one tenant causing problems to the commercial tenant underneath. What about the other tenants? What's going on?
Yeah, funny you should mention that. This particular tenant stopped paying his rent. This hadn't previously been brought to our attention. So he had a number of medical issues and he had a number of psychological issues as well. He had indoor facilities and plumbing, but he didn't always like using them. So what he started doing was going to the toilet outside in the car park. And he wasn't particularly worried about whether he was on his own or not, which caused a certain amount of consternation with regard to the other tenants.
Oh dear, it just sounds like the worst tenant you could possibly ever have.
I'm not sure he's the worst tenant you could ever have. What that sparked in my mind is we used to have a lot of HMO rooms, and I remember distinctly, but there was this particular tenant who was a heavy drinker and we can't really control that. His girlfriend was also a heavy drinker, and long story short, there was a murder inquiry. I mean, not in the property, but the lady died. But for me, that is the worst experience from a tenant's perspective.
Wowzers, murder inquiry, totally got you. That is the worst. Coming back to this difficult, challenging tenant, what did you do, Paul? How did you get the property back?
We've got this guy that's like flooding everywhere. Allegedly, he's got bladder problems, which, you know, I'm not really sure what that's got to do with it. He's got psychological problems. He's not paying the rent. Instantly, what came to my mind, Abby, was, well, it's a safety thing. So what we did is we said, look, you can't live here. We have to make the apartment safe. So we cut off the water and the electric to that apartment so that he couldn't kill himself. We didn't have to do this, but we paid so that he could go and stay at a local hotel. And so we thought that would solve the problem, because his caseworker could get involved and, you know, everything else. Okay, it's costing us a load of money because we're having to pay out for a hotel room for him, but even that didn't work. We paid in advance for him to stay in the local hotel. What happens? He got kicked out of the local hotel. If I was a first-time landlord, which obviously I'm not, I've been doing this for 40 years, but if this was my first ever tenant, which it could have been, you know, statistically, it could have been, the council refused to take responsibility and do anything until he'd been evicted. But as a result of him not being evicted, well, 4 other families lost their homes, and a business lost its place at work, and I feel the whole thing's very dangerous. So the next thing he did was went back to the apartment because he wanted to live in there, and it turned out, long story short, that that was the centre of his community, and there was a pub just over the road that he loved. So he wanted to live in this apartment because he was just dead opposite that pub. And he went back to the apartment where we'd boarded it all up and, whatever, just for safety reasons. So he phoned the fire brigade and said, oops, sorry, I've left the panel inside on the stove. Can you? And so the fire brigade opened the door for him. Beginning to end, this whole process took 6-7 months.
Yeah.
We had no income from 5 flats at all for 7 months, and we had to pay to rehouse the business downstairs. And that would wipe out most landlords.
Yeah, it would.
Now, for us, didn't really matter because we've got loads of other stuff. So what's my message here? Even if you do everything that you know how to do and you follow the law to the letter, you're sometimes going to end up in that kind of situation. We bought that building, I think it was in 2015, bought the building for £285,000. We spent about £100,000 refurbishing it and splitting it into the 5 flats and the nice office below. Over the years, we've consistently made £20,000, £30,000 a year profit from it. And that's been, say, since 2015. So we've probably made £200,000 or so rental profit. The capital value has gone up from the 285 plus 100 that we bought for it, refurbished it, whatever, so call it 400. And it's now worth round about £1 million. So you could take a short-term view, a load of stress, whatever, all the aggro, or you could take a long-term view, well, we bought it for 400, it's now worth £1 million, and it's cash flowed about £200,000. So capital growth, 600, income, 200,000. Would you be prepared to do that in order to have a bit of stress and lose £20,000 or 30, whatever it was? Yeah. So what I always say is the biggest mistake you could make, or any of us can make, is not to buy houses. Yes, you might have the odd tenant or whatever, but you take the rough with the smooth, and on average you make an absolute fortune.
And also, Paul, if you think about it, today, and the insurance would probably cover you for that, and a lot of landlords take 24-month rent loss insurance out, don't they?
Yep.
That you can cover yourself as well. My biggest fail, are you ready for this?
I am interested. Abby, you've only been a landlord for 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
You haven't had time to make any mistakes.
Can you remember that commercial that I tried to buy in Gaul?
Yes.
And you quite rightly, as my property coach said, absolutely not, it's not a deal. And I was very upset about that. So that's one of the mistakes, getting too involved in a deal. But no, one of the biggest mistakes that I've made, or not biggest mistakes, but it's just this is what happens, this is property, is I bought a house for me and my kids, and I did a buy, refurb, refinance. So you buy it with cash, you refurb it, which increases the market value, then you put a mortgage on it and pull out your cash. So this is a house I'm going to live in with my children. Bought it for 200,000, did 136 grand refurb on it and put a double-storey extension on it. So made a huge big kitchen diner. So total all money in with about 340,000, and it was valued at 375,000 when I bought it. 6 months after we'd done the refurb and everything and the extension, we've moved in, my kitchen floor starts to crack. And I'm very confused. I'm like, why is the kitchen floor coming up and what's going on? Had a few builders round. Turns out that the original wood flooring hasn't been laid properly. So it's all got to come out. My kitchen's got to come out. And they need to do a brand new concrete floor. That's 4 weeks out the house and 14 grand down.
Ignoring everything else, between that time you finish the project, where you got all your money back out and whatever else, what's worse? Not buying the property, not increasing its value by the £100,000 it increased it by in the first place, and then another £50,000. So you're probably 150 grand up. There are so many people that don't start property because they've heard some horror story. To make sure that that affected as few people as possible, what I did is I looked back over my last 40 years in the world of property, and I actually wrote a book, My Property Investment Survival Manual. So if you hit the link below, go and get yourself a copy of that. I mean, if you want to have a laugh at my expense, he did what? That can't happen. So generally speaking, yes, there were some issues. I've managed them along the way. I want you to read it so you don't go and make all the mistakes that I made, because I've made a few.
The biggest mistake you can make is not investing in property. I've known Paul now for the last 7 years, and Paul's been a property investor for 40 years. You've built your portfolio, you've moved you and your family here to Monaco, books, magazines, on the BBC. I mean, Paul knows what he's talking about, so definitely make sure you click that link and get his book. But don't let the fact that stuff could go wrong stop you from amassing your wealth, from building your portfolio. And let us know in the comment what you think. Have you failed at property? Have you had a go with it your first one and then you've never quite got back into property? Would you like to start property? Just let us know in the comments. Click the link to subscribe and we'll see you next time.